to the 2019 QBM Griffith MBA Masterclass. Thank you for giving up your Tuesday evenings and coming to this event. I'm Chris Fleming and I'm the MBA Director here at Griffith, and I'll be trying to manage the academics as they give you their masterclasses. One of the things about academics is they do love to talk, and I'll be getting lots of these kind of signals from the back row if I don't stay on top of them. In terms of some housekeeping, first of all, you can see the two exits in the case of a fire. The bathrooms are on the left-hand side of that corridor that you were just in before. You are being recorded and live streamed, so if you could turn off your mobiles or put them onto silent, that would be really good. So we're going to begin the evening officially with Professor David Grant, who's the PVC of the Business School. So I'd like to welcome David to the lectern.
So yes, I'll begin the evening officially. Welcome everyone, good evening, and welcome also to all those joining us online, live stream. Thanks for coming to this event, the 2019 Queensland Business Monthly and Griffith MBA Responsible Leadership Scholarships Competition Masterclass. That's the last time I have to say that, I think. It's quite a mouthful. Before I begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, especially those that may be joining us at this event. This is the fourth year in which we've held this wonderful competition in partnership with the Courier Mail's Queensland Business Monthly. And I'm delighted that we've been able to continue that partnership with QBM. As Pro-Vice Chancellor of Griffith Business School, I have the privilege of working with a wonderful group of staff, students, industry partners like QBM and alumni, what I call the Griffith Business School community, who are committed to building a forward-focused, future-ready business school. And if you join us on the MBA, you'll be joining that community. The business school's mission is to deliver an outstanding business education and also outstanding business research through engagement with industry, government and the various social communities that we serve, and to do so in ways that contribute to a prosperous, equitable and sustainable future. And in many ways, the Griffith MBA and the QBM Griffith Responsible Leadership Scholarships, which have brought us together here tonight, they embody that mission. Recipients of the scholarships have the opportunity to study on the Griffith MBA, an MBA that explores all of the business disciplines, the regular business disciplines, if you like, that you'd expect: accounting, economics, finance, people management, marketing, strategy, and so on. But what's so special about that MBA, and what has undoubtedly contributed to it being consistently ranked among the top MBAs in the country over the last few years, is that it's built on a set of core values and approaches that are crucial to doing business in the 21st century. And these are values that set our MBA and its graduates apart from others, and it gives its graduates a distinct career advantage, if you like, a distinct edge in the labour market. In short, what we do is we like to think, and you'll see some evidence of that when you meet some of our graduates from the MBA, we like to think that we develop business leaders on our MBA who are innovative and entrepreneurial thinkers, and who practice and understand sustainability, who are responsible in their actions, and whose leadership demonstrates a well-developed, highly informed Asia-Pacific perspective. Now, as you're aware, tonight we've set up 3 mini lectures, if you like. They're scheduled for the evening, each of which will resonate with those various values approaches that I've just outlined. And the lectures are an opportunity for you to enhance or to experience, if you like, firsthand what it will be like to be a student on our MBA. And of course, they'll also provide you with some content for your reflective essay and as you move forward. The lectures will be given by 3 of our wonderful expert staff, and these colleagues will be formally introduced to you by Chris a little later. But I'd like to take the opportunity now to personally thank them for their contributions tonight. So to Nick Barter, to Brad Jackson and Naomi Birdthistle, on behalf of the school and of QBM, a big thank you for doing tonight's gig. I should also say that a little later you're going to get the chance to ask some questions of our previous winners, a couple of our previous winners, Cara Turnley and Tanya Lippus. Cara and Tanya, again, great to have you here this evening. Thank you very much for agreeing to speak and take some Q&A session. First, though, you're going to hear from Louise Brannerley, who's editor of the QBM, Queensland Business Monthly, and business editor with the Courier Mail. We're delighted that we have this partnership with QBM, as I said, and in respect of these scholarships. I think QBM and the business school share a similar vision and share values in respect of the need to produce socially responsible, globally aware leaders. So it's a no-brainer that we formed this partnership a few years ago. Louise herself has been editor of the Courier Mail's business section for, I think, more than a decade. She also edits, as I've said, the paper's Queensland Business Monthly magazine, which showcases, if you like, the best business journalism in the state. She's a Bachelor of Arts degree, a Bachelor of Business degree majoring in journalism. She's a very experienced reporter who, over the years, has covered the banking, resources, retail, agricultural and small business sectors. And then following Louise, Associate Professor Chris Fleming will, the Griffith MBA Director, will provide more of a forward, I think, for this evening's masterclass and introduce, as I said, each of our speakers. Now, in many ways, Chris, you could say, also embodies the many of the principles and approaches, if you like, the values of our MBA. He's a founding member of the Griffith Centre for Sustainable Enterprise. He's a member of the Griffith University Cities Research Centre, a senior associate of mainstream economics and policy. He's an applied microeconomist with teaching, consulting and public policy experience, and his research and consulting interests really do centre on social and economic projects, programme evaluation, natural resources and environmental economics. And in that sense, he's well credentialed, as you can tell, to lead our MBA. So, without further ado, I'll pass you over to Louise. I look forward to meeting you later on this evening, and all the best for the competition. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thanks for the opportunity to say a few words here tonight. As David said, the Courier Mail and its business magazine, Queensland Business Monthly, has had a great relationship with Griffith Business School for several years now. And, you know, we promote the MBA scholarship program and we run columns by Griffith academics and, you know, profile past students who are running successful businesses. But for me, it's more than that. It keeps Griffith ideals of responsible leadership, ethics and sustainability front and centre in my mind as business editor. We're currently working on a feature on the circular economy for an upcoming issue of QBM, and I know that's a topic that will resonate with many of you here in the room tonight. It was once a niche concept and it's now gaining mainstream traction and unlocking enormous business opportunities, and Griffith University is right at the forefront of that movement. Last year, after attending this presentation, I was so impressed with the outlined MBA course program. I half joked to David that I was considering signing up myself. And, you know, who knows down the track what might happen. Because for now, you know, the world needs people with the skills and perspective that this course provides. And this time last year, we were talking about the moral, decay at the centre of the banking industry. Since then, we've had the franchising inquiry, which has thrown up more examples of unethical behaviour. And currently, on a daily basis, we're hearing horror stories from the aged care industry. So one thing's for sure, whether you're in private enterprise or working for the government, there will always be a need for leaders who are brave enough not to let profits govern all their decision making. So I wish you all luck tonight with your scholarship entries and your future endeavours, and I hope you all, can be forces for change. So thank you.
All right, thank you, David and Louise. So the way the next part of the evening will work is, as David suggested, we will have 3 mini lectures, one based on each of our core values. And at the end of each mini lecture, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and we'll take questions from both the floor and also from the 20 or 30 people who are listening online. The first lecture will be on sustainable business practices, and that will be given by Professor Nick Barter. The second lecture will be Responsible Leadership, given by Professor Brad Jackson. And then we'll have a third mini lecture on intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship by Associate Professor Naomi Birdthistle. So first of all, let's welcome Nick. Nick is a good friend of mine. He is a champion of the sustainability mindset space in the business school. He is currently the director of Griffith Online, but he was the former director of the MBA program. And in fact, he was really the director who ensured that our MBA doubled down and progressed these values and became very much a value-based MBA. And I've just been trying to continue the good work that Nick put down. He's an expert in sustainability. He does a lot of research in that space. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Nick to the stage.
Okay. So I'm off this one now, yeah? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Nick, and I was just saying to my colleagues, actually, I always feel nervous before I do any presentation. Even if you join and you get taught by me, I'm always nervous before I get going. And I think my colleagues are too. So if you're feeling nervous, don't, because we're doing plenty of it. Obviously, one of the challenges, I think, in these kind of setups is how do we make this a bit of a conversation? So we'll see where that takes us. I'm going to talk to you about sustainable business practices, and really more specifically, I'm going to try and talk about understanding sustainability. Through the introduction, I've been running around this stuff for a while now, and I think I've spent too long thinking about it. And that's one of the advantages I think we often lose sight of with any degree that we do, is, as a student, you get an opportunity to spend time with somebody who's thought that much about that much, so really are experts in their field. And one of the things I would encourage you to do, maybe not today, but if you do join our MBA, is, milk us academics with all the questions you can about anything and everything in order that you extract the optimal value for you out of the degree. Let's move on. So it's really hard to talk about sustainability when it's a really big subject, and it takes me a fair while to get through the material when I'm teaching it regularly. To be able to kind of condense this down into 10 minutes and go, da-da, and the answer is there. So I'm not going to really be able to do that. I'm going to kind of give you maybe one lens or one sliver through it. I'm going to try and drop a few thought bombs, but if you join the course, I think people keep telling me I drop a lot more thought bombs on you. And so you won't get enough out of this for me to give you a full explanation. You won't, because to get that full explanation requires lots of people and lots of chat and lots of discussion and lots of reading and lots of video watching and all the rest of it. But what I want to give you is a bit of a story and some big ideas. So the story, you could go back further, but we'll go back to 1962. In class with me, we go back much further. Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. Is a book. How many of you read that book? Go, Dave. Go, Brad. So that's a book that's famed as kicking off the sustainable development movement. So that's before I was born, before most of you were born, I'm sure. And is it 50 years ago? Yes, it's nearly 60 years ago or something, isn't it? So not that long ago in human history. And that was a book about the silence of the spring and the use of DDT ruining eggs, and birds weren't singing anymore because none of the young were growing, etc. And then in 1968, there's a few other key waypoints, but I'll just pick out a few. 1968, there was this picture. Does anybody know what that picture's called? Blue marble? No, not quite. That's called the Earthrise picture, that one, but close enough. That's great. And the Earthrise picture was, there's a great book about the Earthrise picture, and they weren't actually supposed to take it, the astronauts. They just turned the camera back on the Earth. But obviously the importance of that is, they argue, is it's one of the first times we saw our world from outer space. And so before that time, you could realistically be a flat earther. And you can still realistically be a flat earther if you join a particular YouTube group, but most of us wouldn't. And what's important about it is that it kind of gives us a sense of perspective. And that's one of the things sustainable development is trying to do, is trying to give you a sense of perspective about who you are, where you fit. And in 1972, Barry Commoner, cover of Time magazine, great cover of Time magazine, you might want to Google it, it's a really good image. He had these 4 laws, which really kind of derive from that. And they are that everything's connected to everything else. And so that's a very simple one. You don't think about necessarily connection in terms of it's all some mystical game, but more around the idea that everything on that, because there's no borders, is bumping into everything else. You might have come across an idea called the butterfly effect. That's the kind of idea. Then everything goes somewhere. There is no away. And that's really to reinforce that when I was a young lad in 1975, I had a Rally Dido bike. Nobody, yeah, I know. Some people know. And that bike is, if it hasn't been melted down, it's still here in a tip somewhere. And that's an important idea for us to remember. Because what we do as human beings is we tend to work in quite near and close, okay? And we tend to work psychologically with what we see as all there is. And so when things are out of sight, they are literally out of mind as well. And the argument with sustainable development is you've got to stop that way of thinking. And you've also then, not quite captured in these 4, you've got to punt forward in terms of your range of thinking, in terms of your length of thinking. Barry Commoner said nature knows best, and any human intervention in a natural system is likely to be detrimental to that system, and there's no such thing as a free lunch. So I'll just pick up on the free lunch, and then I'll come back to the other one. The free lunch idea shouldn't be a surprise to you. In terms of everything you're wearing, everything you eat, everything you do, everything you're surrounded by, one of the ways I describe this in the course is what we've forgotten in this room right now is we are drowning in earth stuff, right? And we are earth stuff ourselves. And so the idea here really is to remember that actually for you to have something else has not got it, right? So we don't make anything, we transform a lot, okay? The nature knows best bit is really about, I put it in red because one of the challenges we want to get across to you in this course is moving away from the idea of the human-nature split, which goes back much further than 1962. But we want to get you to start to problematize the idea that there's humans and there's everything else. And that language kind of reinforces the idea that nature is some separate category, and we're trying to get you past categorical thinking, much more into systemic, borderless thinking. Okay? So I'm going to shift on. 1980, the Copernican revolution, that's a good Google. Google Nicholas Copernicus. He was the guy that said the Earth goes around the sun doesn't go around the Earth. So the reason it's there is because Our Common Future, UN report written in 1987 that first kind of codified sustainable development, argues that what we've got in the narrative of sustainable development is this kind of Copernican revolution, this complete change of how we think about ourselves on the planet. In 2012, Resilient People, Resilient Planet came about. So that report argued government. This report argues corporate strategists. So that's an important link. And it's an important link for you to make as MBA students, because actually what it starts you to get to think about is this is not government's responsibility alone. Okay, I'm not going to let every government off the hook. But you should also start to think about the fact that the real change makers in our society are corporations. Okay? And thus, the real change makers in our society are the decision makers in corporations, and thus, corporate strategists matter. And that's where you come in. Because as MBA students, you're already, right at the top of the peak, right? And you're going to continue that way by investing in your MBA. And so, we won't do too much of it here, and I've brought up quite a lot. Actually, I'll bring up, I didn't mean to do that. Let me see if I can get us back on track. We're kind of going to run into the end now. So, one of the key ideas for you to remember is that in 1960 there was 3 billion people on the planet. So, and in 1970 there was about 3.2. So when I was born in 1970, so there's 3.2 billion people on the planet. And all you need to do now is think about this room being the Earth, and you think about the rules we would have had when there's 3 billion people on the planet, and the rules we have when there's 7 billion people on the planet, and the rules we might have when there's 10 billion people on the planet. And you suddenly go, oh yeah, we may change things up a bit for how we think about what we do. And the argument we give you in the MBA is we start to challenge conventional business theory, okay? Which was built, a lot of conventional business theory, a lot of it, certainly in my read, was laid down in the second half of the 20th century. And particularly, there was a really interesting golden period, I think, for strategy around the 70s, when you will all come across, if you haven't already, a guy called Michael Porter. And so we start to challenge some of that convention, start to challenge some of those ideas. And where we get to with your thinking is we want to move you away from categorical thinking. One of the things students in my class do if they're not listening closely is they use that, and then they get a red mark, because I tell them that's old thinking, and this is new thinking. And the key thing to note with the new thinking is I've kind of made a nod to different ideas, or different categories, or different ways of thinking, but notice the dash lines. The dash lines are really important as a metaphor for reminding us that there are no borders other than the borders we create in our heads. Okay? And we want you to get into this way of thinking rather than this way of thinking, where this way of thinking will get you into ideas of what we call weak sustainability. You can Google that term, you'll find out what that means. And it'll get you into this idea that there's trade-offs to be made. Okay? And where we want you to push is almost push through that categorical idea. Okay? When we go into the course and when we go into sustainability a little bit more, we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. You can Google these. There's 17 of them. There's 179 targets. And no, you don't get tested on these or the targets, so you don't have to remember unnecessarily ridiculous numbers. But this, for me, this is the strategy. This is the strategy for humanity. By 2030, this is our strategy. This is our game. Those are our measures. And one of the things you will do is start to explore those a little bit and ask yourself, well, okay, do I buy into that? Yeah. And one of the things as corporate strategies is where your organizations sit in making that happen. Griffith University is very committed to making those happen. And being an organization that is actually not sustainable, but contributes to sustainable outcomes for society. Now that's a level above just making your organization sustainable. That's actually being a force for good. Okay. So all of this, you will have seen this on our advertising. It gets you into, what makes a responsible business today, and you will start to question that. And we want you to question that, and we want it to hurt a little bit, actually. Hurt not physically, but like, I can't make sense of this. This is annoying me. This is not, We want it to be like that, and it should be like that. Because, in the Anthropocene, which is another term, Google it, we'll explore it in class, but it's a good term. The questions are, what world am I perpetuating? And so, now I'm going to kind of skip over the whole lot of my course and tell you the answer. And the answer is, you need to ask yourself these questions. Okay? You need to start to recognize you live in a borderless world, and you need to ask yourself questions that don't create psychological distance. Okay? And that's why we ask things like, would I want to drink it? Would I want to breathe it? What is the impact of the decision on people I meet? What is the impact on my friend's wealth? Because it's personal and it's real. Okay? Because one of the challenges of business language is it deals in language that promotes psychological distance. And that allows us to other and not deal with the problem. And we'll present some research that's quite fun on that, and we'll talk about language and all sorts of things. So that's it. I've gone over time, or am I okay? Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Nick.
Okay. Yay. So Anybody got any questions? Hi, Mark.
Hey, how you doing? I just wanted to touch on your last point, and you mentioned it earlier about creating psychological distance. When humans suffer from temporal discounting and are very good at creating cognitive dissonance, how difficult is it to, I guess, build that holistic social change so that it's not just corporates leading the way, but you've actually got changes to behaviour of human beings and it becomes systemic as opposed to interventions? Or is that covered in the course?
That isn't. I have a really simple answer to that, but it's not the right answer. It's not the answer you want, but it's an answer I think you'll get through the program. Okay, so the simple answer is conversation is how we change people's minds. Then the more complex answer is how do we have conversations? So we're having conversation, right? But we're all in here having conversation. Then there's one-to-one conversations, then there's email conversations, then there's advertising as conversation, then there's films as conversation, etc., etc. That's probably my simple answer to your question. But as I say, if you really want to know about leading change, fostering different levels of society, I think you want to go through the program and maybe lean on my colleague Brad a little bit as well. So that's it.
Delegation.
So actually, that's the perfect answer, isn't it? It's just like, I've got a little bit of it, but not all of it. So, yeah.
I actually got a fairly simple question. I'm always intrigued about, on the one hand, you've got a lot of intellectual people thinking about concepts, but what it actually means for people living on the ground who say, well, I don't really care about all this because, I've got to get food on the table and I want to go to get it as cheap as possible because it impacts me. Yeah. And I think that is a real challenge in all the sustainability we're doing. Yeah. And keen to sort of understand better how to...
No, you're right. I think what we have to remember is that all societies are stratified, right? From wealthy to intellectually privileged to not so wealthy to, whatever. There's kind of the pyramid idea, if you like. And I think my simple response to that is that everybody in this room has the privilege. And thus we have the imperative responsibility that comes with that. So actually, I have no problem with somebody who is worried about making their paycheck, not worrying about this stuff. But I have every problem with people like ourselves who have the privilege and the opportunity not trying to foster a more sustainable outcome for everybody. Because the thing we haven't had a chance to explore is that's within sustainable development and the big ideas of sustainable SDGs is actually we're going to make that person's life easier as well. So, yeah.
Hi Nick, we have an online question from JSB Barker. Corporate responsibility is often seen as a soft option for organisations off to the side of traditional business practices.
Isn't it just, yes.
How do you challenge that?
Oh, I don't know. I've never liked the term corporate social responsibility because it creates exactly what you said in the question, this idea that sustainability or the environment is just another thing I need to deal with. I'll just strap it on the side kind of thing. We're not trying to do that here. We're trying to change the way you think about an organization. We're trying to change the way you think about, the conventional borders. And so actually we're trying to, quite literally, I think, trying to make this part of how you operate. That sounds terrible because this is an intellectual exercise in a university, but that's the goal. And one of the challenges, I think, now I've said it out loud, would be if you don't want to change, you shouldn't change. But what you have to do is come along the intellectual journey. Because that's the important aspect of university, is questioning, exploring. Otherwise, you don't develop and you don't grow. And we would argue to round that out, you need it because in order to be a responsible leader going forward, all the issues that drove us towards creating sustainable narratives for humanity, all of those indicators are not getting better. They are getting worse. So this problem isn't going anywhere. It is just going to get more and more ingrained, and we have to deal with it more and more. So that was a long answer, sorry. Hello, Cara.
Hi, Nick. So do you think there is a place for regulation? I think I already know what your answer is going to be. Do you think there's a place for regulation to, because a lot of problems with corporate social responsibility is if you work for a company that's listed on the stock exchange, the focus is going to always be on short-term profits, returns to shareholders. So to divert our attention to more longer-term measures and kind of underpin that with sustainability, do you think there's regulation there that we could do, or is that just going to then create loopholes and people will find a way around it anyway?
Okay. I think, so people always game the system. They're never going to stop that, right? I have two responses to that would be, yes, I think there's a role for regulation, but also I would ask you to remember that the regulation we have now isn't necessarily because it's the most rational regulation. It is serving somebody's agenda or people's agenda. So the kind of thought I want to throw back around that is, my colleague Chris and I were talking about this recently, actually. In the 1970s, Milton Friedman, I don't know if anybody's heard of Milton Friedman, he made a big statement, ended up in the New York Times, really started to change the way we thought about economics and the role between the state and the market. And that went on steroids with Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and the Chicago School of Economics. And it showed itself up through the Business Roundtable, and the Business Roundtable in America recently came out with a brand new, it was almost a Back to the Future statement about what they thought the role of business was and who its stakeholders were. And actually, if you read into business history, that was all there before. Okay, that's not new thinking. So where am I trying to go with this? I think what I'm trying to say is, yes, there's a role for regulation, but also we have to recognize that people will be rational within what they believe to be rational. Okay, so if you're told, make money, make money, make money, lots of decisions that are completely irrational from a humanity perspective are rational within the confines of that box. I don't know, so if you pattern all that together, we are saying there's malleability, you can challenge convention, regulation will always be gamed, regulation shifts and bends and changes through time. Really responsible leaders will arguably shift and change through this RMBA their views of what makes for a long-term successful business. And if we were to boil that back, we would tell you that what makes for a long-term successful business, do what's right for people and you will get it right. But people is a really big word there. It's not some people or some shareholders or, and it's people generally, do what's right for them. Okay. Sorry. It's like you want a lecture now. I want a lecture now. It's like, what do we think of that? Thank you, Cara.
Right, thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Nick's right. This course will make your brain hurt, but you will never forget this course. The way we structure the program is we encourage students to do this course either first or very early on in the program, and it does set the scene for the way the program develops. So, responsible leadership is the next topic, and that's going to be delivered by Professor Brad Jackson. Brad is a Professor of Social Innovation, and he's the Program Director of the Graduate Certificate in Leadership and Management in the Business School. He also serves as the Program Lead for Collaborative Leadership in the Policy Innovation Hub. Brad's reasonably new to Griffith. He came here in March 2018, is that?
2019. Yeah, 2018. Right, yeah.
Okay, time flies.
Yeah.
Brad used to sit in the office next to me. He was, before that, the Professor of Public and Community Leadership at Victoria University of Wellington, where he was the former head of the School of Government and the head of School of Management. Before that, he was at the University Business School, and he was the co-director of the New Zealand Leadership Institute and the Fletcher Building Education Trust Chair in Leadership. That's a mouthful. And you probably picked up there's a bit of a Kiwi connection going on. And anyway, I would like to welcome Brad to give this presentation.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chris. Yeah, thanks for your very kind introduction. And yes, I'll just locate this. It'll come in handy. I'm having a little bit of difficulty. Can you help me?
Check it's turned on.
You see, well, I'm not the Professor of Information Technology. I guess questions. Are we getting questions? Okay, responsible leadership. Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. And I just want to commend you all for putting up this feedback. What can we do about this? Is this mic off? I think that's probably the critical thing. Okay, better now? Fantastic. To commend you all for stepping up and applying for the QBM Griffith MBA Responsible Leadership. The great leadership scholar James McGregor Burns said there are only two things that distinguish a leader from a follower, and that is that they take the initiative and they take responsibility. And that's what you've done by stepping up and doing this tonight. I'm going to be focusing on responsible leadership, one of the three key values. And I just want to say, Nick, that was a fantastic setup, because what we've got is an incredible systemic, big picture, interplanetary focus on sustainability. And now it's taking it, as the discussion came down to us and what we do in that particular context. So what I want to do tonight is just focus on one very key question, and that is leadership for what? And I'm going to suggest to you that that question is nowhere near asked as much as it should do. And yet, I've been studying, I've been trying to practice leadership for many years, I've been teaching it for 20 years in MBA, and I'm more convinced now that that is the most important question for us to focus on. And most especially when you are thinking about taking on new assignments or new jobs or whatever. People ask me, should I take this job on? And I say, what will it enable you to change that you can't change right now? Forget the conditions, forget the office, forget all the other things. That's the most important thing. So I'm going to suggest to you that is a question that's vital here. So I'm going to issue a question, but I'm also going to give you a task. And essentially, so I think it's going to be quite pertinent to the essay that you're going to be writing as part of this process. Probably the most important thing that you will do throughout your MBA journey. And I'm basing that on 20 years of hard empirical data teaching MBA all over the world. And that, I think, is probably one of the most critical things for you to be focusing on. So, first thing I want to do, though, is I want to issue a caveat emptor and a profound apology on behalf of the leadership development industry. This is just a small sample of what we describe as adjective plus leadership. So here's how it goes. And by the way, this could be a very important learning for your MBA. Beyond, take anything that you think is remotely positive and no one's going to argue against, and then apply the term leadership. And then get out there and get a consulting business and get going. You know, so that's so that's very, very important. And of course, what's great is if you're, for example, to say, you know what, let's flip it around, and this gives you a sense of how powerful the adjective is. So if you said, look, it's really important to be inauthentic, really important to be an inauthentic leader, or I love this mindful. I was thinking of to mind empty leadership, very, very important here. But you'll see what I have done is I've highlighted Griffith red colours, corporate colours, responsible leadership, because as far as I'm concerned, that is the one that's really worth focusing on hanging on to. And certainly that's a critical reason why 20 months ago, I chose to come across the Tasman to join the Griffith Business School because it's, as David was saying earlier, it's central to the mission of this business school. And I was looking for a business school that really not only said it was going to do it, but it's going to do it. And also, it's a central value of the Griffith business. So I wouldn't say I had the choice of the world, but I'm going to say to you that this was a really important reason why I decided to finish my career here at the Griffith Business School. So responsible leadership. So you can forget the rest. Oh, and by the way, one of the most critical things that you will pick up here is you're going to become an incredibly sophisticated, critical consumer of leadership. Leadership texts and leadership ideas. So you're going to be a smarter consumer, and hopefully you're going to be a smarter producer of leadership when you come out of this of this program. So responsible leadership, what is it? Well, it's an idea that took hold in the early 2000s, and I'm referring to Thomas Mark and Nicola Pless, who I think have done most to advance this thinking in the area of responsible leadership. And by the way, I think the slides are going to be made available, Rebecca, is that? Yeah, so, yeah, okay, and it's going to be recorded too. So they're actually based at the University of South Australia now. But they've defined responsible leadership as the art of building and sustaining trustful relations with all relevant stakeholders, based on a vision for the good of the many and not just a few, which is exactly what Nick was arguing in terms of broadening. And it's interesting. What strikes you about that definition? What are the kind of words that come out at you and say, that's not what I would have expected? Any particular words? Trust. Yeah. So this sort of trustful idea is the central currency of the relationship. Other words that surprise you there? Very much so, yeah. So a much broader sense of, so it's in line with stakeholder, and if you like, it creates the leadership that will drive that too. Yep. Art. Interesting to think about this as an art. You know, one of the key focuses I have in leadership is emphasising what, if we think of it as an art, and the various arts disciplines, how that can deepen our understanding of leadership too. So there's the definition. Now, how about the task of the responsible leader? And by the way, they also talk about the responsible follower too. They work hand in hand here. Responsible's core task is to weave a web of inclusion. So kind of new agey, but when we start to put some substance around that, hopefully that'll give you a sense. It's a pretty accurate description of the kind of web that we are unconsciously weaving in our work, but for the benefit of the Griffith MBA, we become much more purposeful in that web of weaving that web of inclusion here, where the leader engages herself and himself among equals. So it's actually a mindset. It's not about leading, following, etc. It's actually saying we're all here, the 7 billion on the planet. Who do we need to really engage here? So when we look at this web of inclusion, they very thoughtfully have provided a web to make sense of the environment within which to work. Now, you don't need to pick all the details, but there's some obvious contenders in terms of stakeholders. The obvious ones are board of directors, employees, but guess what? You move around the web, you start to focus on family. And by the way, my experience working with MBA classes, that family becomes, you never knew you had such a big stakeholder. They become really central to you here. But guess what? Fellow citizens, future generations, peers, a much broader web of relevant stakeholders. But they also give you a cue in terms of how you need to be in that web. There's a few roles here which are kind of obvious, visionary. Everybody's focusing on this notion of being visionary. But guess what? You also need to be a steward with some of these stakeholder groups. You need to be a servant. You need to be a citizen. And more further out, you need to be a coach, architect, change agent. So they're giving you a very elaborate map here to think about how you would engage as a responsible leader in that particular context. So great map, great web. Now what? What makes that tick? What makes that drive? What makes that go from a conceptual idea to a map to some kind of journey? What's the difference? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Okay. Well, I'm going to suggest to you it's purpose. But it's also other aspects of leadership too. But I'm going to highlight the role of purpose in creating the energizing drive to bring that web of inclusion. You create a very powerful purpose, becomes a strange attractor that brings that web together. Now, in the most recent edition of the very short book that the late, great Ken Parry and I authored, by the way, Ken taught MBA here at Griffith and is a Brisbanean, and he introduced me to this wonderful city and this wonderful university too, and to leadership studies. But we've basically come up with the 6 lenses of leadership, which essentially the book is arranged about how to make sense, how to investigate leadership in a multidimensional way. Now, our argument is that most people go straight to position. If they're looking at leadership, they say, oh, you mean the CE, you mean the minister, you mean the archbishop, you mean the captain. Or they'll focus on person, the exceptional qualities that person might particularly have. That's what leadership is. Or their ability to create exceptional results, so focus on performance, yeah? So most attention, and with all due respect to our media colleagues, that's generally where a lot of the attention is. However, these lower levels, below the iceberg, below the water, my experience suggests that these are the lenses that you can really start to develop and get some genuine insights. You can start to look at process, yeah? And for my own passion, I'm a geographer originally, is around place, the role of place in driving and being shaped by leadership. But of course, back in Griffith Red, the focus on purpose is really critical too. So as you move into your MBA, you'll be very much focused on these top 3, but then we'll start to work it through these other aspects of making sense of leadership. And to do that, we've got here our wonderful 6 lenses of leadership, our leadership hexad. In the journalist's world, there are the 5 W's and the 1 H. Yeah, the 5 W's, so which are who, what, why, how, and where. So one of the things that we're going to ask you to do is to start to inspect to get the full story, is to start to look at leadership from a multifaceted way, because we're very conditioned to focus on who creates leadership through formal authority and who creates leadership through informal authority, but we need again to focus a lot more systemically around that, and that'll be an important part of your MBA journey here. And certainly my critical experience that I've observed is that when we started a leadership course, is that people would say, I'm here because I want to be seen as a leader. I want to be considered as a leader, and I want to work on my leadership style. And we very gently and not so gently started to focus on saying, look, get over yourself, get focused on what you need to change and why that's important. So in 12 weeks, and what's remarkable, that so many graduation dinners that I've been to the night before the MBA graduation, is how many people pay tribute to say, I came here to move up the organisation, and some did, but a lot of them moved out and were doing very different things because they discovered a very compelling purpose that was very important, and I'm sure that's the experience here at Griffith too. So quite a different transition. So look, just to underline the power of purpose, well, the exercise that we did at the University of Auckland is we encouraged all MBA students to read a biography, an autobiography of a leader from a different time and place, someone they'd always been curious about. We gave them 2 weeks, then we gave them a 15-minute grilling interview asking about what they'd learned about leadership. And one of the most powerful lessons for all of them was that it was this possession of a very, if you like, deep down inside from the very childhood era, age, focusing on this purpose. They have a clear sense about what they wanted to change in the world and why that was important. For good and bad, by the way. Often we learn more from tyrants than we learn from heroes here. The other thing that they recognised is those leaders broke every leadership principle in the book. They were, they would fail every test in terms of leadership. But there was this powerful, compelling purpose that drove them and those around them too. So, what's fascinating is when it's self-evident that purpose is important, but when you look at the academic literature, there's very little focus placed on what is purpose, what is a good purpose, how do you create a good purpose. And so it's an area that my colleague and I have started to, Steve Kempster and I have started to move into say, well, let's problematize that. What makes a good purpose? And one of the critical things, I think, in terms of Nick, when I thought about the United Nations SDGs, the goals there, is that, they're at a very sort of abstract, systemic level. How do we bring these down to the day-to-day, to the people, to particularly what we need to be able to do and what we need to be able to change here? And that's the critical work that we can do here in the context of the MBA. They're abstract, They're vital and they're important, but what does that mean to what we have to do tomorrow and the day after as well too? So look, just in terms of making a distinction between purpose versus mission, purpose is why the business exists. It provides a guiding principle to which our efforts can be aligned. And it sits above mission, objectives, and strategies. Mission focuses on what we do, whereas purpose is why we do it. So it gets below that. It really explains why that's so fundamentally important for human beings. Mission provides focus, and purpose fuels passion. And so they're complementary. People will often stick at mission, but actually need to go further to get into purpose. And look, there's numerous examples about this, but probably the best one that I've come across has come from Oticon, which is the second largest manufacturer of hearing aids in the world, based in Copenhagen, and by far the most profitable. And this essentially is their purpose statement. And it's not what you would necessarily expect from a hearing aids company. Yeah? People are our starting point. People first is a promise that everything we do always begins with the people we're doing it for. We're not simply trying to help you hear more, but to live more. And that's been pivotal in terms of how they position themselves in the broader marketplace amongst all of their stakeholders here as well. Just a simple, very elegant, you can see the artistry behind that. So, looking ahead, this is the key question I want you to consider. And we can do that, obviously, for the reflective essay that you've got to face to you, but it's a question that I'm going to suggest is going to be pivotal to you to explore in the MBA and beyond. And it's a wonderful opportunity halfway through your career to reposition yourself. So the 4 questions, which kind of build on the 4 questions that you posed, Nick, was what will be your impact? Why is, and sometimes legacy is a way of phrasing that. Why is this important? Who are your relevant stakeholders in this quest? And critically, how will you engage with them? How will you enroll them? How will you bring them along? So they're the 4 questions I really want you to be considering and thinking. And I was absolutely delighted. I was searching, in fact, I think I was searching for Oticon on the web. And I saw Tanya Lippis' photo. And it was great to see you there, Tanya. But what was even more exciting was to see purpose beyond profit. And I thought, wow, that's what I'm arguing. So full marks for the marketing team, Rebecca, and for all of that there. And I'm also particularly excited because Tanya is one of our graduates from the Graduate Certificate in Leadership Management. I have the honour and privilege of directing, and won an award last year, the QBM Griffith MBA Scholarship. So, and I gather that 3 of your colleagues from the City of Gold Coast have also put their hands up. So you've blazed the trail. You've created your own web of inclusion there. But I'm absolutely delighted for that. So, and the final reason why I'm particularly delighted by this ad is that, so I found this ad on Monday, for Tuesday. Yesterday I was driving past the Dutton Park Cemetery, and as you do, and you're doing okay now. Get off. But you'll like this, I think. You'll like this. And look, I looked across, and there's this enormous billboard advertisement, yeah? And it says, it's all in purple, I think. It's got a kind of purple colours, not red. But it's from another university promoting the MBA, their MBA. And it said, question everything except your purpose. Yeah? And I thought, hold it. And I'm going to suggest to you that that is the most important thing for you to be questioning. And so, with all due respect to that learned institution on the other side of the river, I would beg to differ with respect and say that is the most important question you could be considering. And maybe this reflective essay is a really good start to do that. But either way, I wish you well. And, I've had the honour and privilege to work with MBA students all over the world, and it's the most remarkable journey that you will have the potential to embark upon. And Griffith's as good as any other place. And in terms of the power of purpose, several years ago, stuck your neck out and said, we'll create a sustainable MBA. Everybody else said, they're crazy, why are they doing that? And it's paying off in terms of your rankings. in the focus that we've, in the AFR boss. So it does pay off. Performance will follow purpose. So yeah, great demonstration. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and good luck. Yeah.
Is there any questions?
Yes, mate. Yeah.
I can talk like this. Or you want me? For the others.
Okay. Is that Joris? Yeah.
Yeah, Joris. Yeah. I'm just curious to see if the 6 lenses of leadership change when you take off a Western culture hat and put on, let's say, a Chinese hat. I traveled to China for work, and it's quite different how they, I think, talk about purpose or leadership and things like that.
So it's why it's important to see the lenses not as absolutes, but as ways of making sense. Because there's a danger for you to focus on one aspect of the leadership, of what you're seeing. By saying to myself, well, hold it, hang on, what's the purpose here? Who's leading, from a positional perspective, the processes that they're engaged in. What I'm going to suggest to you is it's a way, because it's so easy to fall into cultural traps and stereotypes about seeing leadership. I remember I was on sabbatical in Japan, and my colleague said to me, you're a professor of leadership, of course we don't do leadership in Japan. That's what the Americans do. And I said, well, funny enough, last week when we had that staff meeting, Doshi said to Yoshi here about this and this, and I suddenly saw there was an example of leadership there. And they said, oh, really? And besides, I've never seen so many museums dedicated to Japanese chief executives, anywhere in the world, celebrating. Every chief executive, once they retire, writes a tomb on leadership. So yeah, I think it's important to be able to say, the emphasis and what you choose to observe and see, but I think, culture, and this is why we've emphasized place so critically there, as an important way of making sense. But it's really getting disciplined to actually start to look from all those different, but also looking at possession, place, performance, process, and making sure you're doing a really thorough job as per the journalists have done over the years there. So excellent question, Joris. There's a big chunk on culture and leadership in the very short book, so thank you for the segue, Yes, Rachel. There's Mike. Mike's asked the question.
This is an online question. It is from JSB Barker again.
Oh, great.
Is it okay not to know what your impact is yet? What if you have a core purpose, but you don't know what the final idea is yet? The study will help, I hope.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, great distinction between purpose and impact. I think it's an imagined impact. It's seeing, along the way, as I'm developing this purpose, what are those kinds of points of impact along the way? But yeah, it's a quality, and this is why I think this notion of being able to visualize and being able to draw on the arts for inspiration are very important here. So yeah, excellent job in terms of saying, and by the way, nobody turns around and says to you, hang on, in your essay that you wrote for this, you said you were going to, but a lot of this is already there for you. A lot of this is already inculcated. There's something that drives you, but you may not have been able to articulate it. You may not have had the time to really think about. And there is something about, those early childhood experiences in terms of formulating these drivers. And sometimes we get away from those. We get distracted. We end up getting involved in different types of careers. A lot of it's getting back to what was that thing that really drove us? What was the thing that you really want to change in the world? Why is that important to you? Be really important and clear about why that's important to you, because if you can't answer that question, you certainly can't enroll others around that way. Yes, Nick.
I want to pick up actually on the back of that. The way you present purpose is like some bit of granite inside you, right? That's unchanging. And I wondered if you really think that, or how malleable purpose is. So purpose can ebb and flow through the time of one's life.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, in this day and age, nobody likes to commit. Today I want to go this way, I want to go that way. Yeah, so granite, nobody wants to do granite, Nobody wants to say, no, this is something I stand for, and this is something I've always stood for, and I always will do, You've got to be flexible, but I think purpose is something that actually, there's a lineage there. And sometimes it can go, certainly my engagement with Maori kaumata was often that was ancestral. That went back 5 or 6 generations. And that was a very important line in terms of that. And so I know it's incredibly unfashionable this day and age to say, think about your past when we're so focused on the future. But one of the most wisest things I learned engaging with Maoris is look to the future through the past. So it's not so much granite, although it's got to be tough and it's got to have resolve. But I'm going to suggest to you that it's about discovering something that's kind of constant and linking. Your tactics, your strategy, your goals, your impacts, everything changes. But there's something I think, I know in this postmodern world to suggest there's any absolutes here is not. But I'm going to suggest, I'm going to slightly push back on the granite. I'm not sure if granite is, I suppose we might say diamond in the rough. That might be the way we look at it, turning from coal to diamond. But it's something, but I think there's something there about that. How it gets articulated, how you demonstrate it will change, but it's about finding something there, I think, it's important that can be a driver for you. Terrific question. So, yep.
All right, thank you, Brad.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, all the best.
All right, so our third lecture tonight is from Associate Professor Naomi Birdthistle. Naomi is relatively new to the business school, but she's an award-winning teacher and researcher. She's taught extensively and internationally, and her PhD thesis was recognised as an outstanding achievement in the field of family business studies. Her main areas of research include family business issues, entrepreneurship education, high-growth entrepreneurship, female entrepreneurship, and minority ethnic entrepreneurship. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Naomi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ooh, something to follow there. So very interestingly, the three of us did this separately. We all did our own notes, our own slides. We had Nick start back in 1962. We have Brad talk about your purpose. Well, I'm going to bring all of that in a sense to my part, which is looking at entrepreneurship and innovation and intrapreneurship within your organization. So I'm going to go back even further. I'm going to go back to the timeline of 1730, which is when, in a sense, whoops, there we are, when the term entrepreneurship actually emerged. And it actually was written by Richard Cantillon, an Irish-French economist, in 1930. And in his essay, Cantillon made the contribution of identifying the entrepreneur as a risk bearer. And he actually then influenced Baptiste Say and Adam Smith, etc., in their further writings. But we're going to fast forward again to the 200 years to 1934, when we're going to look at Schumpeter. Schumpeter was a key influencer in the entrepreneurship discipline, and he equated entrepreneurship with the concept of innovation applied to a business context. So Schumpeter actually says that to be an innovator is somebody who implements change through the carrying out of new combinations. And interestingly, this definition has not changed since 1934. So we have numerous modern definitions of entrepreneurship, which are basically a reworking of Schumpeter's definition. So most definitions include a strong link between entrepreneurship and innovation, and distinguishes entrepreneurship from a simple form of management. It is thus seen as the process, and it is a process, of identifying, developing, and bringing forward new innovative ways of doing things for the exploitation of commercial opportunities. So even though it's 1934, we can't and we haven't improved on this definition, so it is still in line with today's thinking. But thinking is one of those things we need to do within the MBA. And one of those could be that you are going to be an intrapreneur within an organization. So it could be you might consider during your MBA time that you will take on the role of being an intrapreneur. And an intrapreneur is, in a sense, the little brother of entrepreneurship. And it is a term that is coined to reflect formal or informal activities aimed at creating new businesses in established organizations, in established businesses, by creating new processes, new products, innovations, and market developments. And I have seen this through the MBA program here and around the world, where oftentimes it's actually through responsible leadership that we have innovation and entrepreneurship occurring within organizations. So an established organization that acts entrepreneurially gives their employees freedom and financial support. And this is always a challenge, to have that financial support, but also to have the acceptance of failure within an organization. So those, for example, like the inventor of, and you have all of them there, the Post-it note. That is the classic example of entrepreneurship happening. So we have this back in 1964, going back again in time. As I've mentioned with my colleagues, we do go back in time to go forward. So basically, Spencer Silver created a sticky substance. But the organization said, no, we're not going to use that. We're going to shelve that idea. 6 years later, a colleague of Spencer Silver was singing in his choir, and he was using pieces of paper with sticky parts on it, and it was tearing his book. But he remembered something that was in this organization, which was this particular adhesive. And that created the Post-it note. So think during your MBA, during the lifetime of your MBA, can you bring something to your organization that is innovative, that is creative, and develop a business within a business already? Richard Branson, he quite recently quoted and said that Virgin would never have grown into the group of more than 200 companies it is now were it not for a steady stream of entrepreneurs who looked for and developed opportunities. So is entrepreneurship something that happens in Australia? It does, very much so. So we do quite well in terms of entrepreneurship in Australia. According to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Report for Australia, you have ranked 7th in the developed economies for entrepreneurial employee activity. That equates to 1.2 million Australians currently being entrepreneurial within somebody else's organization. Thus, an estimated 7.8% of the adult population in Australia is engaged in developing or launching new products, new processes, new business units, new subsidiaries for their employer, which is comparable with the likes of the US. Yes, we beat them. 7.6% is the US. In Australia, we are higher than that. But interestingly, slightly below Israel and Estonia. Estonia was a leader with 9.1%. So whilst on your entrepreneurial journey, your MBA, sorry, I have entrepreneurship in my head always, whilst on your MBA journey, can you consider how you can build an entrepreneurial culture within your own organization? And you can use the MBA to assist you on this particular process. So being entrepreneurial, again, is about applying entrepreneurial skills and techniques inside an established organization. You, as the leaders and responsible leaders of the future, could promote entrepreneurship within your organization by applying 3 steps to establish solid foundations for truly entrepreneurial culture within your company. 1, have a clear vision and honest company values. Embrace a culture that accepts failure, and encourage employees to take ownership of their own ideas and turn them into reality. So that is a challenge for you. So the 3 of us are giving you challenges today, so this is another challenge. So evidence shows that companies that transform towards an agile and entrepreneurial culture are more likely to develop radical innovations in-house. It has appropriate reward and incentive structures, as well as mechanisms by which to spin radical innovation projects back into the innovation lab. Now, I personally have seen many MBA students develop an entrepreneurial mindset and be a senior leader, and the two can go together in their organization. This, again, is a challenge that I want you to consider. But some advice to you when developing an entrepreneurial ecosystem within your organization. Each ecosystem is unique. So this is Vogel and Kuratz, 2018. This is appropriate in their context, but it's a launching pad for you to consider as an ecosystem within your own organization. Holistic implementation is vital, and all the core dimensions need to be aligned with the overall vision and strategy of your innovative activities. Adopt a multi-stakeholder approach involving both internal and external stakeholders. You should appoint yourself if you want to take on this task as the Chief Ecosystem Officer in your organization. Stand up and say, I'm going to do this, and be the conduit to top-level management about the entrepreneurial activities within your organization. But remember, bureaucracy blocks innovation. You should facilitate, but don't regulate. So we have Stephanie. So I'm going to explain about Stephanie in a few minutes. So I'm just going to say, why is entrepreneurship important for you to consider? Well, MBAs have always prepared students to launch and manage their own business. Business schools is a pit for you. It's a playpen. It's a place where you can actually make mistakes, have fun, try new things, be creative, be inventive, fail, go back and start again, and reinvent yourself. That's the opportunity you can have in the business school. That's the opportunity you can have with your MBA program. And I did say failure, and actually it's more valuable to have failure during your MBA time rather than when you are out in business, when that failure has greater impact. So the financial and operational frameworks that an MBA teaches will help you evaluate businesses and run them at scale. An MBA can fuel the fire in you if you have already an insatiable curiosity or burning passion. Just about every skill you gain by doing an MBA could be useful to you as an entrepreneur. I have seen it firsthand in Ireland. Two of my students in Ireland were doing the MBA program. They use the MBA throughout their leadership, their sustainability courses, etc., to test their idea. They went out and started their business, and 10 years later, the business was sold for $72 million. I should have taken shares in that business. I tell you, I still have their business plan, actually, I still do. But we have Stephanie, for example. Stephanie is a former music teacher, completed her Griffith MBA in 2012, and has since launched 3 businesses. She established the first electronic musical school in Brisbane in 2012. She is currently the MD for Broad Aperture, a business she founded as a change management and organizational development consultancy firm. She's around today if you want to have a chat with her about that, about change management, but also the process of being entrepreneurial as well. And we have Andrew. Andrew started his own company. It was an educational school. It was to help people from non-English speaking backgrounds gain their responsible service for alcohol certification. But he's also got the license for Ramen Dambo, which I have frequented a lot, and it currently employs 40 people. He has 3 outlets. He's got 2 on the Gold Coast and 1 in Brisbane, and another one coming as well. On your table, you will also all see a gift that is there, and I'm wearing my gift as well. This is by Gala Watson, who has created Bimby Love, again, a former Griffith MBA student. So we have, in a sense, what we call an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Entrepreneurship is about creative problem solving and acting on unique insights. As a whole, it is estimated that 12% of the Australian adult population are actively engaged in starting a new business. We are 6th out of 24 developed economies in terms of our level of entrepreneurial activities. But again, actually, Estonia is number 1 because they have an environment that is pro-business, they have a visa-friendly approach, you can do everything online, their technologies are second to none. It is a tech capital of Europe at the moment. They are streets ahead of many, many countries. But in terms of Australia's ecosystem for entrepreneurship, the Australian Innovation Systems Report has found that, and this is the sad news, that Australia has, yes, an efficient financial system, but it is poor in terms of its venture capitalists when you compare it to its counterparts. It has strengths, yes, in its educational system. It has a very good educational system in terms of health, in terms of training, etc. But its primary school and high school educational system for entrepreneurship is very poor. It is lagging behind other countries, for example, the UK. Every single child in the UK for 1 day a year does enterprise. In Finland, it is embedded in the curriculum from primary school right up to high school level. Australia is still catching up. Maybe you might be the one to help Australia catch up. Other research has found some weaknesses with our ecosystem. For example, the Boosting High Impact Entrepreneurship report found that Australia has a cultural aversion to risk, which I was actually surprised to read about with the amount of snakes and spiders that you do have here, which I didn't really know about before I came. You do unfortunately have not necessarily, you do accept entrepreneurs, but they're not celebrated as well as they should be. So Australia does actually need a steady supply of experienced and successful entrepreneurs, advising the first-time entrepreneurs and startups, because unfortunately, currently the advice being given, not by education institutions, but elsewhere, the advice being given is not from people who have actually done it themselves. I've run 4 businesses, 2 have failed, 2 have been very successful, so I'm very confident in actually advising business people and startup companies. But unfortunately, there's others who have not gone through the scaling of technological companies themselves. So, my takeaway from today, like my colleagues, which were calls to action in a sense, is what Australia needs. We need, and I was delighted to see a lot of female MBA potentials here in this room, so maybe female entrepreneurs as well we might consider. There has been a decrease in the number of female entrepreneurs in Australia. Unfortunately, my own studies have shown that lots of policies are gender insensitive. PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, has highlighted that women-led crowdfunding campaigns achieve a greater average pledge amount than male-led projects, which I was delighted to read, but then read the next paragraph. This is in sharp contrast to establish funding mechanisms for business startups and growth in which women-led businesses continue to face endemic barriers to accessing finance. Australia needs more high-impact entrepreneurs. Basically, we need more fast-moving startups. Yes, the media is full of hype about unicorns, but Australia does unfortunately fare poorly in relation to its global counterparts. China has 145 unicorns. We have 2 at the moment. We have Atlassian and Canva that have reached the value of at least 1 billion in the space of a few years, and that's how you categorize a unicorn. But not all businesses are unicorns, and I came across quite recently this phrase, we need cockroaches. We need cockroach entrepreneurs. Oh, what are these? Well, cockroaches are very durable, they're very resilient, trying to kill them. And by God, you've got big cockroaches here, I tell you. But trying to get rid of them is very, very difficult. So we need still, yes, we do need the unicorns, but we also do need cockroaches. Never thought I would talk about cockroaches in a talk to MBA students, but this is what I'm going to do. We need people who are resilient. We need entrepreneurs who have the tenacity and the ability to see through difficulties. We need people who understand about what challenges are and how we can change within our organization to adapt to current marketplaces and environments. So lastly, if Australia is to grow a world-class startup ecosystem, it is essential that we create an environment that is conducive, not just to the creation of successful companies, technology companies, etc., but also to the retention of those companies for long enough that we can harness their economic impact. Several previous studies have identified knowledge transfer as an area of weakness in Australia. There is substantial evidence that Australia is poor at translating and commercialising its strong research base. Changes are underway. The government, research organisations and businesses increasingly look to more formalised models and roles to facilitate relationships and collaboration. Can you be part of that change? Thank you. I tell you, that was the hardest talk I've ever given, to try and get 25 years of teaching entrepreneurship into 10 minutes. So I hope I've given you a taster, at least, of entrepreneurship and how Australia is at the moment, what opportunities we do have, and how you can contribute to those opportunities as well.
This could be to Naomi or Stephanie as well. Sorry to put you on the spot. It's probably touching back onto more entrepreneurship and in a sense looking at the change element in organisations. So John Cotter a few years back authored Accelerate and looking at, I guess, the ability of organisations to break down the hierarchy and create networks within their organisations. Just curious from your perspectives whether you've seen that occur in organisations, which has led to innovation and entrepreneurship, or whether you think that it can be done in organisations where there is that very traditional hierarchy and that high level of bureaucracy. What's the environment that's most conducive to it?
If you've ever gone to Facebook or Google's headquarters, it is a really entrepreneurial organization. It does not have hierarchies. It actually has a fun pit. It has toys, it has table tennis, it has your MD sitting beside your lowest level staff member. It really has got rid of all of those hierarchies and squashed them down. So the best thing to do is go down to Cohort on the Gold Coast, and you can see entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship happening within Gold Coast Hospital. They have now a space in Cohort where their emergency doctors are all in trying to find how to fix defibrillators, fix people's hearts, fix the inside of people by actually just getting rid of all of those barriers and enabling them to have time to be creative. So it can happen. It can be large multinational companies, it can be small companies, or it can be an ecosystem like Griffith Business School as well, which encourages you to think, more flat, let's say. Stephanie, do you have any contributions to that?
I'll give you examples in the past 2 years, whilst I've been doing management consulting, of 3 different organisations. One was a small family-run management consulting firm that did quite well until it ran into the example that Naomi brought up about the map. You need to be really cognizant of the fact that it's not cookie cutter. Mm-hmm. So, you really need to, and if I can weave in some of what Brad said as well, purpose is incredibly important. I worked with a large research development corporation, and it government run, massive national organisation. didn't do so well because the purpose was misaligned with, you know, who they hired. So that was really difficult. I think it's one thing to have the, you know, strategy that is quite glossy and, you know, you paid quite a lot of money for it, but actually cascading that through to be genuinely tactical because it's got aligned purpose is incredibly difficult. And the third one is actually a global organisation that is private, and it, you know, it is like the Google, very much so. And people, you know, are encouraged to be very entrepreneurial, and it's quite successful because it's flat, even though it works within the confines of a hierarchy, and it still has systems and frameworks. But really, from my experience, it's very much about the people and the purpose and how they actually show up for that and take accountability for themselves within that, and that is leadership. Yes, there you go.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. And we have one question from the online community. Wonderful.
Hello, yes, and we only seem to have one person that seems to be engaged online.
Fantastic.
As far as questions are,
I
although
know.
we have at least, you know, 30, up to 33 or 35 people listening. They're just a bit shy. So this is from JSB Barker again. What advice do you have for those working in not-for-profit, for-purpose orgs? Is social enterprise a good bridge for this? Perhaps bringing corporate partners in to help establish entrepreneur ideas?
Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll plug our Eunice Centre in our Logan campus, because we have, obviously, as one of our values and our mission statement is about social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. So we within Griffith actually have support structures for businesses who are within the not-for-profit or social enterprise realm. So I think a lot of times within social enterprise, networking and relationships is fundamental. And I'd be delighted to help reach out to the Eunice Centre to anybody who would be interested in that domain. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we've one more question from the floor. Just if anybody online is wondering what the pause is.
Thank you. I'm interested in your thoughts on what entrepreneurial studies for high school students or primary students would look like. I remember business studies in 9, 10 before picking senior subjects, and it was very much do this topic,
Yes.
assignment,
Yes.
rinse, repeat. What would you like to see them do?
Thank you. Great question. I actually was at Southport Secondary High School today talking about entrepreneurship and embedding it into their programs. It's applied, it's getting your hands dirty, it's having fun. But you know what the biggest challenge is? It's the parents. The kids are ready to engage in, and actually I use enterprise when we talk to high school kids or primary school kids, because the parents don't like us to consider just a profit orientation from a business lens, whereby enterprise is very much about the skills, competencies and behaviours that we're trying to develop in the students for the 21st century. And lots of those skills and behaviours are within the entrepreneurship domain, which is about creativity, innovation, about decision making, about group work, teamwork, etc. So basically, I love the Finnish model. The Finnish model is very much, get a pile of exercises, get a flat classroom, get kids engaged and questioning things and bringing in even sustainability issues or some wicked problems. And the ideas they come up with, God, if my first years or if my MBAs actually thought of some of those ideas, whoa, fantastic. They have they don't have failure in mind. They just want to try and make the world a better place. And they want to actually try and make things better. So they will constantly pivot. They will constantly change things and not question. They would just say, okay, it's not working. Let's go and do something different. So the Marshmallow Challenge is something I do with high school kids. They pivot constantly. My MBA students pivot once. Because of the barriers they have, because of the preconceptions that people are going to say, oh, you shouldn't do that, whereby the young kids are always open to change, always open to pivoting. So I would basically have fun, applied environment and basically get them all to learn from each other and pitch as often as we can get them to pitch as well. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, 12 months ago, Cara and Tanya were sitting exactly where you are now. They both obviously did very well, won and runners-up in the scholarship, and they've kindly given up their evening to take questions from you guys about their experience in the competition, but possibly more importantly, their experience in the program. So, Cara and Tanya, are you happy to come? Sure. Reluctant to come down. Now, did you want to say something first, or just want to take questions from the floor? How do you want to?
I did actually write something on a post-it. I was thinking about it. Oh, no, that's not mine. That might be better.
That's probably not. That's mine.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I guess, first of all, congratulate all of you because you've made it through the first hurdle. So you should be very proud to be sitting in this workshop or listening online. It's not a small thing, so kudos to you. One of the things that I wanted to just explain, or from my perspective, is that being a part of this competition, it gives you exposure to such an awesome network within the university. And even though as an MBA student, because you will decide to study here because it's the best one, regardless of whether or not you win the competition, it's still going to open you up to those networks. But just being part of this, it just gives you that elevated profile and gives you the opportunity to meet so many different people. So yeah, it's an awesome thing to be a part of, and just the best of luck for the following rounds and the essay. And I can't remember what I wrote, but it only feels like a couple of weeks ago that we were here and having drinks outside afterwards. So just yeah, any questions that you have for Tanya and I, yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess just to reiterate what Cara has said, congratulations. And I think yeah, this was really, I always wanted to do a postgraduate, and I think this is really the catalyst in driving me forward in actually doing my MBA. And thank you to Griffith academic staff, because I'm about halfway through my MBA at the moment, and just the values are very much projected in the learnings and the lectures. I do the face-to-face lectures, and I'm currently studying with Nick at the moment in sustainability and systems thinking, and the interaction that you get and the engagement, not just from the lecturers but also the other people that you meet, is amazing. And it's the best experience, and yeah, I'm hugely grateful for the opportunity. So yeah, well done guys, and good luck.
Any questions at all?
Our online friend, any questions?
Come on, JB.
What's the best thing about both of your experiences so far?
Oh yes, I'm on my 6th subject, but I was lucky enough, I did a graduate certificate beforehand, so I got to transfer over some credit. But like I said before, I think it's the engagement and the people that you meet during the course, but also being able to the applicability of it. So I've done economics and sustainability so far, and just the ability to actually go and talk to your colleagues at work. It's just the stuff that they're teaching you is very relevant and applicable to your everyday, which I've found hugely beneficial.
The best thing for me so far, we actually had a town hall with our CEO. So I work for Super Retail Group, and I texted in some questions to the hotline that were very, sustainable driven, and I felt like it was really tough, and I asked him about gender equality in our leadership team, and so some of them questions actually got read out, and the CEO commented that they were they were sticky questions, and he was happy that they got sent through. So, and then I texted Nick and told him, oh my God. So I think just being able to, as Tanya said, what we're learning is actually something that you can then use in your work, almost immediately. So I'm only on my second subject now, so I'm doing economics, and I did Nick's subject as my very first one, and it just melts your mind. So it's in a good way. So yeah, it is something that you literally can apply straight away because it's so up to date and it's so current. So that's probably the best thing.
And I'll flip that. What's the least best thing? I won't say what.
For me, it's the challenges of time management. I'm still working that out. But it's more of a me thing. It's not really about the program because it's online, face-to-face. There's so many different ways you can access the content. So I think in terms of a university subject or university program, Griffith is actually great. I've studied at 4 different universities now, and Griffith is the one that's, it just makes it so much more accessible. So it doesn't matter if it's midnight and you just want to read some lecture notes. You can do that, and it is actually inclusive online learning. So if you can't make a face-to-face lecture and you dial in or you listen to it afterwards, you don't really have that feeling of I'm not getting something because I'm not there. So you get the best of both worlds, really. So.
No, that's good. Time management, yeah.
Hi, Cara and Tanya. It's Joanna Marsh has asked, do you feel that the Griffith MBA subjects flex with current trends, news and issues?
So I did economics in my first trimester this year, and everything was completely relevant. So yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of Griffith is, as I said before, the applicability and the relevance of what they're teaching is to current issues. So yeah, definitely.
Ditto.
And we've just had a few questions around about your purpose and how did you find it? How do you work with other students? What have you learnt about other industries? And can you comment about other colleagues learning online?
That's like 4 questions.
Yeah. I've done one online session, and that's Nick's class, and that was really engaging, but I haven't done any other online stuff. In terms of purpose, so I did the graduate leadership and management, graduate certificate in leadership and management, and I think there were a couple of lessons just around finding your purpose, and it's the hardest thing ever, and I still don't know if I found it. But there's a difference between your purpose and then a business purpose as well. So I think once you start nailing down what the business purpose is, there's that followership that happens among that, and that if that purpose then trickles down through the hierarchy and to all levels of staff, then I think it's easy to find your purpose in a work sense. In terms of life purpose, can't help you with that one. That didn't answer all the questions.
We might consider that answered, I think. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you again to Nick, Brad, Naomi, Cara and Tanya. So if we could just have one more round of thanks for them. Okay, before we get to sort of the business end, I hope what you've experienced tonight gives you a little bit of a taste of the program, of I think the commitment of the conveners to the program. I mean, it's an MBA that we're all really, really proud to be associated with. I mean, we made that quite brave decision, I think, in 7-8 years ago, to purposely drive an MBA that was values driven and that was focused not just in the marketing, not just in 1 or 2 courses, but in every single course, and also in the way we behave around the core values, around responsibility and sustainable business practices. And a value, I guess, that hasn't had much light tonight, but will as you go through the program, and that's our focus on our region, so the Asia Pacific. So I hope you've got a bit of a sense of that. And I think you've hopefully also got a bit of a sense of how engaged not only our conveners, but our alumni and students are as well with the program. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Now, your task. So the next step in the competition, as I'm sure you're aware, is to write this reflective essay. And I think the important thing is really to write it from a bit of a personal perspective, but also to be able to illustrate how you can take these values, these learnings, into your organisation or into I guess, your leadership, your professional experience, and what that means for you, but also what that means in terms of your broader organisation and society. So you can see from the pie chart on the right-hand side, we've got a very rough sort of marking rubric. You can see most of the weighting is to that idea to be able to apply the values to your purpose. There's also some weighting around telling us you understand the values, so you've been listening. That's always a good start. And of course, 20% around. It's hopefully beautifully written. That makes our lives much easier too. So that's the next task for you. What is a reflective essay? It's a form of writing that examines and observes the writer's individual experience. So it is personal. Don't just tell us what you think we want to hear, or we want to hear your voice in those essays. And we can generally, when we're reading them, we can tell the people who are telling us what they think we want to hear, versus those people who really own those values and are really demonstrating what they mean for them in terms of their organisation. Don't be scared. I mean, we have an incredibly good standard of essays, but one of you will win, and one of you will come runner-up, and a whole bunch of others will also get scholarships out of this process. I hope you take the time to do that. That would be really great. I'm looking forward to reading them. It says that they are due by midnight, or 11:59 to be precise, on Tuesday the 24th of September. So keep that in mind. In terms of some details, there's details around your first and last name in the subject line, but I'm assuming all this information will be made available to them. And Rebecca's saying push the slide and it will be there. That's what I was just talking about, and then there's the next slide going to tell you all that information. Right, so 11:59, and that's the email address, first, last name in the subject line, and that's the way to name the title. So I guess at this point I will take any questions about the competition or about the program more broadly. I've been the director now for about 4 and a bit years. As I said, really proud of where we're going with the program. I think it is a very transformative experience for our students. We frequently talk to alumni who have come into the program perhaps not with a responsibility or sustainability mindset, and then have gone out into their organisation and really done some amazing things. We've got some amazing alumni stories. But anyway, I'm happy to take any questions.
Hi. I think my primary concern will be the exposure of my naivety and all the stuff that we've talked about today. there's so much to go home and read and review. Like, I do what I do from what I've picked up, I guess, somewhat intuitively in my operations. But there's so many more big words that I've encountered today and concepts. I feel like I've got to go home and read and study and research to pull it together. And while I know it's reflective, it's somewhat daunting. Yeah, so any further input would be helpful.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't over-research it. I think there's some honesty in just essentially, telling us your interpretation of what you've learned tonight. So I don't think it needs to be a thesis, right? I don't expect huge amounts of research behind it. I think that honesty will come through. So I wouldn't be daunted by that. All right, I was expecting far harder questions, so that's that's perfect. Now I think we're finished for the evening. We've done all that we had to do. So there are drinks and nibbles in the ship-in just at the front of this building. We will be there. Please come and say hello. We'd love to meet you, and good luck. Good luck with the competition. Thank you.